Now, from Wichita's most listened to sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH. This is Sports Daily with Jacob Albracht and Tommy Castor.
And welcome in, everybody, to a Thursday edition of Sports Daily. I am Jacob Albracht, alongside Anthony Smith, in for the first time here to Sports Daily. Excited about that. More on that in just a second. In for Tommy today, Jad Chambers producing for us. We got a lot to get sorted out today here on the program, least of which are your chances to win some prizes. We've got a Wichita Win Surge 4-pack of ticket vouchers for any game of your choosing. Opening day is tomorrow, but you can pick any time that's convenient for you to go. We'll have that opportunity a little bit later in the program. We'll have your chance to win some HTO, iced tea, and coffee as well later in the show. Lots of opportunities for that, opportunities for your calls at 869-1240. We'll have our K-State insider, Tim Fitzgerald, joining us top of the next hour to go through all things K-State. We'll check in on the football program, how things are going, and a very big signing yesterday that we'll get to here in just a little bit for Jerome Tang and the basketball team. So plenty of K-State to talk about there, plenty of Kansas City Royals to talk about. Another great starting pitcher performance. They had one of the best in the American League, the best in baseball, on the ropes last night, and the bullpen blows it again. So we'll get into that as well. Lots to get to on the program today. News elsewhere in the sports world. You've got a super conference, super league being proposed by some of college football's power players, and we'll, of course, have an opportunity to look ahead a little bit into the Final Four. Anthony, welcome in for the first time. You've been a great caller for a long time. So glad to have you in the chair today there in studio. You can see Anthony and I on Facebook, on YouTube, on X, by the way. You can always watch the show and leave your comments there. What's up, Anthony? How are you this morning?
Hey, man, you would not believe I'm excited and I'm extremely tired, but I feel the energy. So this is going to be the best 2 hours of my life.
We're always tired, Anthony. We're always tired. We power right through it. By the way, you can find yourself in the studio there, some Prairie Fire coffee to help with that, Anthony. They're always fueling us up here at KFH.
I stopped and got me a C4 on the way, so I'm going to feel something.
All right, let's get right into it. So I think real quick, Anthony, you got a shocker pullover on. Quick mention to the Wichita State baseball team who walked off against KU last night. Pretty exciting ending there. But I want to talk a little hoops here in K-State. So Tuesday was a big day for the KU men's basketball program. They bring in Zeke Mayo, finalize that. Some lists have him way up the list. Just for perspective, KU's first transfer, they brought in Riley Kugel. CBS Sports ranks him as the 43rd best transfer. And then Zeke Mayo as the 3rd best transfer. So a nice little, week end into the early part of the week for Kansas. And then yesterday, K-State answers, bringing in and filling a major need for them. They bring in Doug McDaniel out of Michigan. Michigan's leading scorer, 16 points a game, just about 5 assists, a pretty good three-point shooter. He fits a frame. He's a smallish point guard, which Jerome Tang has had some success with. So that makes sense. CBS has him 22nd ranked in the prospect list. I've seen him as high as 15 or 16, but clearly one of the top prospects out there. And Jerome Tang goes and gets him. That's a big win for the Wildcats, and certainly you'd think, Anthony, they're far from done with what they have to do in the portal.
And what's amazing about some of these guys that are entering the portal, when you look across the landscape now, a lot of these guys are impact players on the team that they're leaving from. It's not just a guy who's looking for a new opportunity, who may have averaged, say, 4, 6, 8 points a game. These are double-figure guys that are like stars of the team, and they're entering the portal and going elsewhere. So you really have to start asking questions like, what's really going on? What would make a player who has been an impact player at his current school leave and go somewhere else?
It's opportunity driven. I think, it's hard. I always try. And longtime listeners of the show know this. You may know this too, Anthony. I always try to put myself in the perspective and the position of some of the players. And I get it to some degree, right? You're at Michigan. They're making a change, at coach. You've bought in, you did all that. I mean, when things like that happen, if you put yourself in that situation, I think it makes a little more sense. Like, I don't know what this new coaching staff's going to bring. We haven't been good. I think there's, a guy who's had some success with guards over there at K-State. I like what he's doing. I think he better prepares me to be a professional at the next level. Think about it if you were another student on campus. Let's say you chose Michigan because you really wanted to, go pursue a certain degree, and there was a program there and the professor, and then all of a sudden they come in, they fire that professor, the program's changing. And you're like, well, I don't know if this is the best spot for me. You would be able to leave and go somewhere else, and we wouldn't think twice about it. I think sometimes we forget that athletes are going to play college basketball. Now, look, not all of them, or not even a lot of them, are going to make it as professionals. But I think going in, when you're playing at that level, don't you think, Anthony, every one of their expectations would be to play at the next level? So if you're any of these top players and you don't think you're going to be positioned to best do that, then it makes sense more so to go find the place where that's going to be the case. So none of this surprises me. And then obviously you'll have the earning potential that NIL brings at one place versus the other. That's obviously a big part of it. And that's an important part of it too, because by the same token, if not a lot of these guys are going to be able to have professional careers, if you're that kid's parent now, think about it that way, and you've got an offer at one school that's significantly more than another, what are you going to tell your kid to do? What do we all understand and realize? You don't get very many chances in life to make that kind of money that quickly, and it can change your life. Put yourself in that kid's parents. What would you say? Hey, I need you to stick it out there, be miserable at that school, not be put in the position to be your best, and not take that money sitting on the table for you. None of us would tell our kids to do that. And so I get, none of this ever surprises me. Does it need to be regulated a little bit? Sure, it does, but it shouldn't surprise us.
Well, there's an old saying. There's an old saying that goes like this: money makes the world go around. And now it's more prevalent in the landscape of college athletes. Show me the money.
Sure, but look, I don't think K-State's going to be throwing more NIL dollars around than Michigan. I don't know that that's the case in this scenario. I don't think this is a money thing. I think this is an opportunity thing, and the ability to get better and go play for Jerome Tang thing. When you see the mid majors coming up or something like that, yeah, that's probably more about, and it's some about opportunity, but it's also about money. These kinds of lateral moves, like K-State's not going to be in a better NIL position than Michigan. Kansas is probably in a better NIL situation than Florida, but it certainly is South Dakota State, right? So Zeke Mayo makes sense. But I think when you see these like power program to power program, this one just says Jerome Tang all over it to me. It's got Jerome Tang in that staff. He feels like Doug McDaniel that will put him in a better position. So you make the move. And that's what I think makes K-State pretty dangerous in the transfer portal space, is that everybody seems to really like Jerome Tang and be on board with it. And he's going to continue to be able to compete with everybody for some of these top players. I don't know that in basketball anyway, we've always been able to think about them that way, but I absolutely think they're in a position where they can go get in the mix for everybody. I mean, this is a top 20 or so transfer portal player. If K-State can do that consistently, and we know they've been able to recruit at the high school level really, really well under Jerome Tang so far, they're going to be in a position to be successful continuously for a long time. So we go now and look at the rest of their roster, and much of K-State is, undetermined, undecided. There's a lot of question marks for next year. A lot of young players. I think that they at least need a big, probably two. Like they still have room to add significant players. So we'll see what they're able to do. But It's far from done. A great start, though. I mean, it's a perfect fit, seemingly, for a guy like Doug McDaniel. We look at KU. KU's made a couple of moves. They don't really have the space anymore. And then we look at Wichita State, and the Shockers have not added anybody yet. They've lost, I would imagine they've lost less than people anticipated. They've lost two key pieces, though, in Colby Rogers and Kenny Poto, among others, but, significant starters. I think something's coming. We'll see how much they can play. There's an Oral Roberts transfer out there with obviously ties to Paul Mills that would make a lot of sense if they could figure out a way to make that happen, who can really score it, which they need right now pretty badly with the loss of Colby Rogers. You're a Shocker guy, Anthony. How optimistic are you that Wichita State can get in on this stuff?
Well, I would say that I'm optimistic, but I'm probably not as optimistic because I got a friend, he likes to send me messages of every player that's in the transfer portal. He sent me a link about a guy from Duke that's in the portal who's a 6'11" guy. And we mentioned the Oral Roberts kid. I said, pump your brakes. Everybody had Max Asmus coming to Wichita State with Paul Mills, and he ended up going to Texas. So I'm the guy that's like, okay, I'm not going to get excited about every guy in the portal until I see ink to paper. Now, like you said, if we can get this kid from Oral Roberts, that's good. But I also know we need another big to go behind Quincy Ballard. In regards to Kenny Poto, it seemed like the general consensus was a lot of people were actually ready to see him go.
I think there were more expectations for him to grow. Remember, he was almost gone before and decided to come back. And look, I was excited for Kenny to come back under Paul Mills and see if he could take that game to the next level, but it didn't happen. And so with Quincy Ballard's emergence as much as anything else, I mean, I think that it makes sense on both sides for Poto to move on. But yeah, they'll have to replace him. I don't know. I'm with you, Anthony. I'm a pump your brakes guy because I'm not sure how to gauge expectations right now for Wichita State and NIL. I know where I would like to see them and where I think the ceiling is, which is that they could be in the mix for some of these top guys, much like Memphis is, right? We know that when things are going right, the financial power is there to make that happen. It is simple, and I say it all the time. Wichita State and its support system was able to make its head coach one of the top 5 highest paid coaches in the country at the time. When the support is there, Wichita State is a sleeping giant in the NIL space for basketball.
Right.
But they're not there yet, right? And it's been a lot of years of mediocrity or worse. And so that part has to be built up. So it's this chicken and egg. I don't know how quickly that can happen. So I don't know what sort of expectations to set in the short term for NIL. I know that, we had Kevin Saul and Paul Mills on last week, and they were clearly trying to raise some funds to get that thing going, and we'll see how quickly that happens. There's probably going to be a year or two or more of Wichita State not in the mix for the very top end of portal lists, but having to get it done in sort of the middle of the pack, finding the right fits, finding the right styles. We saw Isaac Brown be really good at that. Some of the players that he brought in were really good players that have gone on to have a lot of success in places. So you got to do some of that. You got to coach them up. You got to win some basketball games. I don't know. I'm with you, though. I don't know what to expect in the NIL space. I have no idea where the Shockers are going to be competing for players right now.
Well, I did have a theory. I know it's far-fetched, but a lot is centered around NIL. And, of course, have to commend Kevin Saul for going on social media, going into these chat rooms, because I even kind of like defended the guy. I'm like, look, now y'all need to lay off of him because he came into a situation kind of like the president of the NCAA did. And so he's having to clean up what was messed up. But my ongoing theory, which is kind of a side joke, is Kentucky could do us all a favor. if they go ahead and fire Calipari and then hire Greg Marshall and he brings Isaac Brown along as his coach, as his assistant, then we won't have to worry about having to pay 3 coaches plus an athletic director.
Right.
But that's a little
Yeah.
side joke. In the fairy tale world, that would work. That would help us out.
Yeah, well, Calipari's staying. I don't know that Greg Marshall's ever interested in coaching again. I have no idea, but yeah, yes, there are things to clean up, but the wins were not there at a worse level than at a long, long time last year. So I was more encouraged certainly by the end of year performance and everything else, but we're at the point in the season now where it's not really relevant. Only relevant if it prevents a player from coming into Wichita State. I don't think I would be surprised if last year's record has anything to do, at least from a players in the portal perspective, on what types of decisions can be made. It's more about the support of the program. It's more about what Paul Mills can say and his staff to connect with these players. Is it a good fit? And when the time comes, can they put up what needs to be there to get to seal the deal? We know that the NIL space is better than it was. It was almost non-existent initially. We know it's better than that now, certainly. So how much better? Time will tell. It is very early in the portal season. I think trying to follow along portal players is a fool's errand. It is very difficult to do. Here's what happens. We see that a player moves on. None of us knew. I mean, we knew Zeke Mayo, but we haven't seen Doug McDaniel play. We haven't seen Riley Kugel play. Not unless you're a diehard have you seen almost any of these portal guys play consistently. So at that point, we're just sort of looking at, stat sheets, right? Well, what did they do at the last place? Like you really have to wait and see styles. I mean, look at Nick Timberlake for Kansas. So, on paper, it's like, oh, that's such a perfect fit. And I'm guilty of this too. I'd never seen, where'd he come from? Towson. I didn't watch a second of him play before he came to Kansas. I have no idea. We don't know if these guys are going to fit. We don't know if they're going to succeed. We just know what they did at the last place. So it's not as simple as, oh my God. And recruiting should tell us this. It's not that way in high school. Like you can get 10 5-stars and not be any good. Like you have to see these guys play, and that's where the coaching really comes in. Are these good fits? Can you make these pieces fit? All of that kind of stuff. But you can chime in on it. A little portal news for you on a Thursday morning, 869-1240. If you would like to chime in, you can also chime in on those video streams. Let's give away our Wind Surge tickets here. Opening day is tomorrow. You've also got games Saturday and Sunday, but these vouchers, we'll give away a 4-pack of them right now, are good for any home game. And you can get your hands on one by being the first caller. 869-1240, a 4-pack of vouchers right now to the Wichita Wind Surge. We'll be right back with more Sports Daily. ESPN Bet ready to take you through all the huge sports moments this spring. The exclusive sports book of ESPN has it all, including exclusive offers and promotions from Scott Van Pelt and Stephen A. Smith. From the playoff intensity to getting on the links and out to the ballpark, there's no better time to be sports fans. Sign up today, and new users get $100 in bonus bets for making any sportsbook bet. Download ESPN Bet today. What a play. Must be 21 plus. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In partnership with Hollywood Casino at Kansas Speedway. Terms and conditions apply. See app for details. A lot of folks on ESPN Bet last night who took the Royals on some plus money to do something special against one of the best pitchers in baseball. Pretty frustrated today with the Royals bullpen, Anthony. Jacob Albracht here alongside Anthony Smith in for Tommy Castor. Jad Chambers producing. This is getting old, and we're not even a week in here. For the Royals, great starting pitching performance. Cole Reagans does outduel one of the best in the business in Corbin Burns. You get into it. Your young players are effective. They're doing their thing. You put 9 hits together and 2 runs against Burns. You got a 3-run lead, or is it a 4-run lead? You got a 3-run. You go down 4-2. It's just 4-3. Sorry, let me start that over. You've got the 3-run lead. Then you give it up in the 8th and the 9th, 2 in the 8th, 2 in the 9th. And it's another blown bullpen game. This time, you're victims of MacArthur and Will Smith again. I'm telling you, Anthony, it is time already to pull the plug on Will Smith trying to close game for the Royals. And I know he got one the other night, but he's not going to be able to be this team's closer. He's just not going to happen. I watched a lot of him last year, and he does not have the same stuff he used to. Can he be effective as a situational reliever? I think maybe. But can he be he's going to take the ball every 9th inning guy? No. And that is very early in this season proving itself. His ERA is only 20, Anthony. Like, can we figure this out? Can we stop running him out there in the 9th inning? Because this starting pitching has been too good to waste this many games early in the season.
Well, what can we say about the Royals? If I can go into my inner Charles Barkley moment, that bullpen is just terrible. I mean,
terrible.
Just terrible. Plain and simple.
I mean, it's bad.
I mean, that's how you have to look at it. I mean, you got your starters going out there, pitching their hearts out, putting you in a position to win the game, and your bullpen loses. And this has been going on how many years? Not months, not one season, but years. And you'd think someone would have the wherewithal, okay, let's fix this. But it seems like this is what they keep putting out on the field every year, year after year. Good starting pitching, bad bullpen. But you want to build a new stadium, but you don't have nothing to decorate the inside with.
Yeah, look, I mean, it is what it is. Like, it's encouraging still, but there's nothing more demoralizing than a bad bullpen. And the Royals now at 2-4, you've had good to great starts in all of those. Waka, one bad inning, but your starting pitching has been incredible. And if that continues and this bullpen problem continues, my point on all of this is, yes, we're only 6 games into a season. I've been saying it all week. This bullpen is a problem, and they're going to have to change it like right now because it's not going to get better. Will Smith is not going to turn into what he was, 6 years ago. It's not going to happen. He's probably going to be what he was in the second half of last year, which is not that good. Very hittable. Can he be a lefty situational pitcher? I think he probably can. Can he be a closer for what looks to be a pretty good team? No, absolutely not. We saw this story last year. I never understood the signing. Will Smith had that job taken away from him last year with the Rangers. They tried to let him be the closer for a while. Didn't work. It was frustrating. That's why this is so frustrating to me. I've seen this story before. Saw it last year with the team that I root for more than any team. So to bring him in right now, it's demoralizing. It has to. And I know we're only 6 games in, and it's okay now. But man, imagine being out there. You've worked your tail off. You've got one of the best teams in baseball behind one of the best pitchers in baseball on the ropes with, a 4-run lead, and you can't hang on at the end of the game. That has long-term effects if it continues to happen, and it's continuing to happen. I mean, this is not nothing, something that's new. Just go look at the game logs for Smith this year. He had the one inning, where he was good in the opener against Baltimore. His other 2 outings have been awful, have been really, really bad. Don't keep running him out there as this team's closer. It's not going to just all of a sudden get better. Again, like, what can you do to find something else? And I think early in the season, they're going to have to do it, because it's going to become a really frustrating season really quickly if this keeps happening to this team.
Well, maybe, and this is a stretch, but I grew up actually watching the game of baseball. And there was a time where you would have guys that would actually pitch complete games. Pitchers had stamina, pitchers had strength, and you might have brought a closer in or a guy that saved the game, but at best, your starting pitchers used to go 7, 8 innings, and you could pretty much bank on them. Maybe we need to go back to those days.
Yeah, and I mean, that's not going to happen early in the season. It's going to take some time to stretch these guys out across baseball. We know the game has changed from what you're talking about. Like,
right.
It doesn't happen a lot anymore at any point in the season. Certainly doesn't happen in April. And I don't want this to be just like a Will Smith bashing. That's not what I'm trying to do. And I know I've done a lot of that. And, people are reaching out to me on Twitter last night and we're just like, I think it's only this isn't something I think that's just going to fix itself. Will Smith can be a part of this bullpen, an effective part of the bullpen. He just doesn't need to be the guy in the 9th inning coming out to try and shut a team down. That is going to have to be somebody else. And we've seen, what is it, 3 appearances right now from Smith. One was good. It was clean. The other 2 were really bad, like really bad. 2/3 of an inning, 2 hits, 2 runs last night. His first outing, an inning, 2 hits, 4 runs, 2 walks. He also had 2 walks last night. Like, you're talking about all kinds of traffic for a guy who's supposed to be your closer. Can't happen. And so just make a change now. Like, what's so bad about that? I get it. We're only 6 games into the season. But you've had 6 good starts, and you only have 2 wins to show for it. That's not okay. And it's going to derail the momentum of what's been, outside of the bullpen, a really promising start for this team. That concerns me a great deal, Anthony, that this could be a longer-term issue for a team that really does look like it has a chance to be pretty good this year.
Right. And, another point, when you have a Will Smith type, and like you said, you're not bashing him, but you're just stating the obvious. It's kind of, and I agree with the demoralizing part. It's kind of like in football. Your defense is putting your team in a position to win, but the offense is coming up with untimely mistakes such as penalties, turnovers, and defense is like, we did all this work and the offense can't do their part. Well, it's just like the starting pitcher for the Royals. All right, we got you in a position to win, but now here comes Will Smith. From one Will Smith to another, one Will Smith said, keep my wife's name out your mouth. Well, this Will Smith, we're saying, keep the ball out his hand because it's a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah, I do think he has value. I just don't think it's as the team's closer. Right? Like, his experience is valuable. He can navigate it. But, like, when you bring in a closer, you expect that to be the best you've got stuff-wise.
Right.
Like, the other team needs to be scared to face him, needs to feel, like they're at a disadvantage before they ever step into the box. And I don't know if the Royals have that guy this year, but it certainly isn't. Like right now, the opposition sees Will Smith come into the game, their eyes get big, right? And so you just I just make the change now. Like we don't need to see this for 3 weeks to realize, okay, that's not going to work. I don't think the Royals have 3 weeks. It's going to be a season of tight margins for them if they want to have any shot to make the postseason. And right now, they're getting the starting pitching absolutely to be there. And for the most part, we're seeing positive signs through a large portion of the lineup, right? Bobby Witt Jr. is off to a good start. Salvador Perez is off to a good start. Michael Garcia continues to, make big plays on offense. They don't even have much yet from Vinny Pasquantino. Like there may be enough offense here. You combine that with the starting pitching, we should be looking at a 5-1, 4-2 Royals team right now, not 2-4. Because you don't get the opportunity to beat Corbin Burns like that very often. And they had it. And that's what makes it frustrating is, they had it. They had it. And they even had wiggle room and they still couldn't hang on. And that stuff, if you watch enough baseball, that stuff's contagious, man. That stuff is contagious and there's no time for it and they can't do it and just make the change now. That's the point. Outside of that, Anthony, outside of the obvious, which is the bullpen has been not good so far, how encouraged are you at what we've seen out of the lineup and the rotation? Because it's been really impressive so far.
Starting pitching better than what it's been, and I'm encouraged by that. Like you say, the offense, they have shown the ability that they can score some runs, just be consistent with it. But like you said, still got that Achilles heel, which is we're trying not to beat a dead horse over the head, but got to shore up the bullpen because, you just got to do it. Plain and simple. I'm on board with you. You got to shore up that bullpen because
they may not have the arms. They may not have the arms, and that's what we've talked about it early in
some
the
money.
season. Like you may not have the arms. It's way too early to trade. And again, my thought is right now what they can do is switch it up in the bullpen, stop running him out there. But again, take some of these young arms. If the starting pitching looks this good, take some of these young arms that have taken longer to develop or haven't quite worked out as starters. Let's start seeing what they have as bullpen guys right now in the minor leagues. Like start to run them out there in those situations now. And I don't know how much of that they did in the offseason. The bullpens are always a year-to-year proposition. There could be just reshuffling what they have now does work, but it's got to be something different because it's been too good to be 2-4, and it just that stuff will live with you. You'll have the Royals today, by the way. So they got rain delayed yesterday. It's going to be a quick turn on the getaway day yesterday into today. They begin a series hosting the White Sox. That one. First pitch tonight at 6. You can listen to it right here on KFH. If you're away from your radio, you can also listen to it on the Odyssey app. Just search KFH. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll continue here in hour number 1. Our K-State insider, Tim Fitzgerald, joining us top of hour number 2. A lot to get to on the show today. We'll spend a little time. There's a story I saw out of The Athletic yesterday about some interesting potential changes, at least ideas for college football. We'll get into that a little bit. We'll sort of set the table with that, and then we can get into that with Tim Fitzgerald when we come back in the top of the second hour. But we'll do it all. It's Anthony Smith in for Tommy Castor. Today, I'm Jacob Albracht. We'll be right back.
Sports Daily on KFH.
This portion of the program brought to you by Crestview Country Club. Weather is great right now. I am going to hit the driving range out there at Crestview here pretty quick. I don't always have time to get out there and play 18 holes. Good news is you can get out there, you can play 9 holes. You can play as many holes as you want, or like me, you can get out there this early in the year and just get out to the range, hit a few balls, do it. But we appreciate Crestview's support. You can give them a call and check in on a membership today. Anthony, I saw this story yesterday. I sent you this. It's on The Athletic, so it gets paywalled for a lot of people. But The Athletic had a nice, interesting story about a potential change in college football. And there's been a lot of chatter about this, but now there are people of significance sort of proposing it. And that would be to have some sort of super league. Now, when we first heard this, you thought, okay, well, this super league is just going to be the SEC and it's just going to be, the Big Ten, and then everyone else will get left out. That's not what this is. So what this is, and it's way complicated, and that has to be pointed out, and you'd be far off from anything because of current TV deals and everything else. But what the group is getting into, because they all see the same writing on the wall that anybody paying attention sees, and that's that they're going to lose every court case under the current model. So their proposition is to take, the main leagues here, the SEC, the Big Ten, the Big 12, and the ACC, put them into a 70-team, I think they're calling it Super League. Those teams would then split into, I think, 10, 7-team divisions, essentially, and play their way through. And what you would have is another group of schools, the rest of the schools, right, that's not in those leagues, playing for the opportunity to come into that league and out, sort of like relegation, right? Like if you don't follow soccer closely and you watch Ted Lasso, it's the thing where you can make it into a league, but you can also get kicked out of the league if you're not very good. So you'd have you'd have those 70 teams who are always guaranteed to be in this thing. And then you'd have everybody else playing for opportunities to get in there, but there would be movement in and out. And then if you did that, you'd obviously be able to kind of set your own rules and do a lot of things like that and handle it a little bit more what feels like professional, at least from a financial standpoint. I don't hate it, Anthony. It's totally different. It would lose a lot of the spirit of what we've loved about college football. And that part of it, like, I'd certainly like to see, different solutions work out. But if it's inevitable, and if they're just going to get sued out of existence, then and something has to change like that, I don't hate this idea. What do you think of all of that? And again, we're way far off of anything like that happening because you've got TV deals that have to be dealt with.
Well, my thoughts about that kind of goes back to the Big Ten. I'm gonna pick on Nebraska because when have they been relevant in the Big Ten? They haven't been. And, with all this conference realignment, I came to a thought process that, it could come to the point to where these conferences are looking at, all right, this team is not holding up their end of the bargain. They're not putting a good product on the field. So maybe we can relegate them to another conference. So it's kind of in line with how I was thinking that maybe, the Big Ten will say, look, Nebraska, you're free to shop around, look for another conference because you guys are just basically here collecting a paycheck, which would open the door for, say, the Big 12 to proposition Nebraska. They have a new TV deal. Nebraska, you come to the Big 12, back where you belong. So it's kind of in thinking with what I've been thinking all along, probably just like you say, a little bit more complicated. And I'm glad I'm not sitting in one of those offices trying to figure this out.
Yeah, it's it's not going to be fun to figure it out. It really just becomes a question of, is it necessary? And I think, if you look at the article and look at who's involved in this group looking for it, it seems somewhat inevitable because there's no way that they'll be able to keep things going. Every time this stuff gets taken to court, they lose because it's never made sense. And I don't know if this helps, hurts, whatever. I don't know what it does to other sports. I don't know if this is, I think this would probably just be a football thing. I really don't know that you need to mess with anything else. And I hope that it can be avoided. I think the problem and the sad thing is here, I really do think we're going to have a near perfect system over the next handful of years with the 12-team playoff, with these leagues. The realignment has more or less settled for the most part among the big schools. I think we're going to enjoy these next couple of seasons so much that, and it's because it's been it's taken far too long to get to this point. And then whatever it is going to change probably pretty quickly. But we'll get Fitz's take on this. He'll certainly have some. I imagine that he's not going to like it. But I think that what was interesting about it is the reason I was always resistant to this idea in the beginning is because I thought it left out Power 5 teams or Power 4, whatever you want to call it now. And this model wouldn't do that. And so it is, less bad than I think what some people feared. Certainly. No question about that. It is not going to leave KU and K-State out of anything, right? And that's always been the biggest fear. So if something has to change and you can make sure that, the typical parties are still to their fans, getting the same experience that they once were, probably the rivalries, die out a little bit, and that part's going to suck royally. And I don't know that this is going to happen. It probably won't. It'll probably be, some variation of this somehow that, changes and evolves and does all these things. But boy, it is, it's pretty stunning to look at some of that stuff, man. It like the ideas that are being floated out there are pretty wild, and they'll change. Like we know, and we can hate it all we want, but we know in our hearts, like something big is going to change with all of this. It's just, what is it, right? Trying to predict that future is wild. We'll see if we can't get to the bottom of it with Tim Fitzgerald next segment. We got to get into the Doug McDaniel thing. How does it fit? What other things are happening on the recruiting trail for K-State? We'll check in on a little bit of spring football, in that regard for K-State as well. That'll be next. Tim Fitzgerald, GoPowerCat.com, joins us as we come back into Sports Daily for hour number 2.
He's got all the insight of what you want to know and maybe some of what you don't want to know. Here's K-State insider Tim Fitzgerald.
All right, welcome back in, everybody, to Sports Daily on a Thursday. Weekly visits with our K-State insider, Tim Fitzgerald. GoPowerCat.com, publisher at Life of Fitz on social media. Tim, how are you this morning?
I'm wonderful. How are you guys?
We're good. You've got me and Anthony Smith today. Anthony in for Tommy on this Thursday. Let's start, Fitz. I don't know if you saw this. Did you see Marchand's story in The Athletic yesterday about some pretty big power players' proposal for college football as they're beginning the conversations. I think the point is they see the writing on the wall and knows they're going to just lose all these court battles of creating a super league. Now, I think, when you hear that initially, right, we fear that, right? Super league, oh no, that's not good. That's SEC, Big Ten, and everybody else. That's not what this is. It doesn't sound like. This sounds like more of a league consisting of all of what would now be the Power 4 schools who would be guaranteed a place in this 70 school grouping. And then you sort of get the rest of college football or the FBS or the other conferences competing for relegation spots to move in and out of this league. I don't know if it's perfect. In fact, I don't think it's perfect. But I do think if you're coming up with anything like this that includes all of the Power 4s, it's at least a good place to start.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, this gets back to the Chip Kelly proposal of removing college football from conferences, which is radical, but it makes sense. When you stop and think about it,
seems it at least seems unavoidable, right? Like, we may not like it, but it seems unavoidable.
All this conference movement, this shuffling, this upheaval is caused by, schools trying to get to the best position they can be in terms of college football revenue. And so I see that this makes a lot of sense, and that's exactly why it'll never fly, because the SEC and Big Ten have no interest in being fair to everyone else. They just want theirs, and they want yours too. They don't want to include this proposal, 70 teams in the upper division. They're like, hell no. I mean, we want like 30, maybe 48 at the most. There's a reason why we're not including you guys, because you're not worthy of our company. We want the money. So I think they have a big enough voting block to shoot it down. But I think this is a sign of everyone else is beginning to come together and try to make proposals to make them turn it down instead of them trying to make everyone else seem like they've done something wrong, and that's why they have to leave and do their own thing. I think this is a positive step. This plan will never take place. It's already been rejected. I think even the Big 12 said no to this, along with the Big 10 and SEC. So there's probably some more problems in just sharing revenue with those guys if the Big 12 is turning it down too.
And look, I don't think this would pass either, but at least it's getting the juices flowing. And I think as much as anything, when you look at, who's being reported to be involved in these conversations, that tells you all you need to know, doesn't it? Like, if these types of people are looking at this, we all need to understand what I've guessed for a long time, that it's just not going to hold up legally. So they're going to have to do something. What it may not be this,
Right.
but it can't be what it currently is, because they will lose in court every time.
Yeah, you're right. You're exactly right. I'm afraid anything they try to create, just because it's removing this from the NCAA doesn't mean it's immune to court systems. I mean, basically the courts keep shooting down the entire structure of college football and college athletics, and saying that these are employees. So, again, I haven't read the entire proposal, so maybe it addresses some of those things that the NCAA can't, but just removing football from the NCAA doesn't solve your problems with the legality of what you're doing. It shifts who's going to be paying the bills for the legal representation. So it's a mess that, I think only, sadly, government can fix, and I'm one that usually doesn't believe government fixes much of anything.
Yeah, I'm with you, Fitz. All right, so that story was out there. I knew I wanted to get your take on that. Let's talk a little bit about K-State hoops yesterday. So, down the road, KU had a big start to the week, right? They get two pretty big-time transfer portal guys, no surprise, one on Sunday, and then an even bigger name in Zeke Mayo on Tuesday. K-State, not that it's a direct comparison, but we'll make it, because in the video of Doug McDaniel, he put in a funny clip of Bill Self anyway, so we'll make the comparison. But that's it. McDaniel's, he's a top guy, and K-State showed again that they can go out and get one of those guys. But this is somewhere, anywhere. Most people have him somewhere right around 20 or maybe a little better, maybe a little worse, but certainly fits a need for K-State, right? What's your take on him? What do you know about him, if anything? And then what else needs to happen, and what sort of roster flexibility does Jerome Tang even have right now?
Yeah. Doug McDaniel's the point guard they wanted to get last year. He's a creative guy. He gets to the rim. He can shoot it. He's a lot closer to Marquise Noel than anyone that was on this year's team. So he really fills a need on this roster, particularly with other young point guards, because McDaniel will just be a junior. He's coming off his sophomore season, so he's still got a lot of growth to make. This was the piece that they really wanted, the kind of the leader, the alpha, the scoring point guard that makes their system run a lot better. And now I look for them to maybe turn their attention. They've got 4 more scholarships to play with, and I think most of those will go to big men, 3, 4, 5 positions. And they certainly, with Gerald Colbert hitting the transfer portal, need a couple of true posts because they don't really have them. So that'll be an emphasis next for this coaching staff. Might add another guard, but also they might put a scholarship in their back pocket. We'll see how it goes, to save for the future. But I think we now know the rosters really need all 13 slots to function properly. KU was shorted some scholarships, and they struggled. They just kind of ran out of players. So in modern college basketball, you really need everyone on board and able to play.
So where is the biggest need? What do we know right now? Let's just start there. We know Ames is probably in the starting lineup now. McDaniel, Kaluma, that's 3. Maybe Gasson is 4, whether he plays the 4 or the 5. They have 3 or 4 young players you like. So is it like, did they still, like, to me, I'm looking at it like they still need one like high end portal guy that they could get in and say, you will have minutes here. And then it's probably patchwork from there, right? Is that enough? Like, is one more high impact portal guy good enough to put the product on the floor next year to compete, or is it going to have to be more than that?
I think it's got to be more than that. I think you obviously need a high impact post player. Those are valuable. They're hard to find, but that they'll set aside. You got to look at it this way. It's like a pay structure right now, where you've got to save some of your salary for, the right players. So it's almost like every program has their own self-imposed salary cap with NIL money. So I'm sure they'll go try to find a post player. I mean, that's why Gerald Colbert's leaving. He knew they were recruiting over him. They'll try to find a couple, and maybe they'll even try to find another, kind of power forward type. But I think they're really high on Buddy Rich, and they still have Taj Manning in the roster, and maybe another 3. A big guard that can play behind Kaluma, and they might be able to do something here that they haven't done since that first class, is to look for some younger guys that will come here and develop. And unfortunately, a guy like Cam Carter developed, I think, all he could, and then decided to move back home to Louisiana. So it's just hard to plan for the future now when players come and go at this rate.
Tim Fitzgerald, GoPowerCat.com, publisher, joining us. Life of Fitz on social media. Another one, USC comes open. Musselman. I saw only that USC would likely have interest in Jerome Tang. That makes no sense to me, stylistically, geographically, the crazy faith out on the West Coast. I think that's a non-starter. And again, people are going to say that he should be interviewed, but that would be one that we can pretty much ignore, at least in my opinion. What do you think about that?
Right. I agree. And I think that's Musselman's job to have if he wants it, which makes Arkansas open. And that's the concern, not USC. Yeah. It's when the dominoes start falling and the right job opens up behind the job Jerome Tang didn't want. So that's one to keep an eye on, unfortunately. That's just the reality in which we live. It's like the transfer portal. Coaches can go into it in a moment's notice like they always have, and it still could happen, unfortunately.
I mean, really, Doug McDaniel's not coming if there's any danger. Don't you think? Like when they got Doug McDaniel, I don't think Tang is going to bring somebody in and then bail. I think
Well,
I think K-State's safe. I just don't think you would do that.
keep in mind though. Well, you keep recruiting. I mean, you're not going to.
I know,
go through the
but
motions. But
it
keep
doesn't.
this in mind, Jacob. There's no binding of these transfer portal guys. He could take it
Oh,
to
so
Arkansas.
he could just bail and go to Arkansas. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no there. In fact, Doug McDaniel could still accept another offer from another school until he's on campus, enrolled in classes. They can leave. I mean, Will McNair went on the overseas trip with Providence, was with that team for 2 months, and said, "Nah, this ain't for me," and transferred to K-State. They don't belong to you until they're going to school. So it gets a little shaky sometimes with the transfer portal.
It'll be interesting. I think when the dust settles, let's just assume Tang is there and Doug McDaniel comes in, and the Big 12 expands next year to also include Arizona and Colorado, two really good teams this year, among others. I just keep wondering to myself, like, this year didn't surprise me at all. In fact, there were points where I thought they vastly overachieved. They ended sort of right where I thought they would be, which was in the mix. But when you think about doing it without Tomlin, I still think it was a bit of an overachievement. Where does K-State fit in all of this? Because I think the Big 12s, we saw fewer teams than we thought we would going into the tournament. Now with 4 more teams, what is that number going to grow to? I don't know how much it's going to grow. That, time and time again, the committee kind of doesn't like to do that. That's why I was cautioned. Like, I don't know if we're going to see 10 teams out of the Big 12, even if we should. So with those 4 teams, maybe you get to 9. Of this group, getting into that top 9 is going to be tough. Doing it consistently is going to be very tough.
And that's what makes the Big 12 intriguing, is the overall balance of the conference in both football and basketball, in which, you can go win or lose anywhere. But there's no doubt that doesn't necessarily get the job done, though. You kind of need that bell cow to show the way. And, I don't know if that's Utah in football, Kansas State, Oklahoma. Someone's going to have to step forward and take that next step and kind of be the one everyone else pursues, because that makes everyone improve. So I'm excited about this grouping, and I think there's more to come, unfortunately, because of the instability of that ACC area.
All right, Fitz, let's talk a little football. I know you're not a huge spring football guy. I'm not either, but they're doing it. Anything we need to know of? Where is the portal situation in football? Are they still active in the portal trying to get players in? Is that all kind of settling by this point? What is the timeline on football as we're watching basketball closely?
Yeah. Football portal opens April 15th, and most coaches are forecasting absolute chaos. At players that have gone through spring football, you see the courts brought down a lot of the protections against recruiting other people's players. And while that was still going on, a lot of honorable programs weren't doing that. Now the courts have ruled, no, you can't restrict the movement of these players in that way. So there's a lot of back channel recruiting going on right now of players off of other teams' rosters. It's grotesque what's going on. I asked Joe Klanderman, defense coordinator, about that at yesterday's press conference. He feels like they're pretty well protected, but there's some programs that could get really damaged by the portal on April 15th with players transferring out to other institutions. And if those coaches see it coming, they're already backfilling with other players from other institutions. So it's going to be, it could be a royal mess. It could be absolute a feeding frenzy over trying to keep your own players and steal other people's players. Everything that we didn't want from the transfer portal and the NIL is all going to come, right in front of us. Is going to become reality. And the courts have supported that. And literally our court system is destroying college athletics because they don't like the structure. And it's going to have to take, some kind of legal intervention to make it, to create a structure that will withstand these tests.
Are the courts destroying it, or is the system doomed to be destroyed because it's not feasible? Like, I don't know that I want to blame the courts for saying, well, yeah, you ought to,
Well,
you can't do that because it's against the law.
Well, they basically have ruled that the NCAA can't pass anything that self-governs. And the problem here is the players don't have a voice. And that's really what the courts are saying. the NCAA schools can pass anything that favors them, but there's nothing really. There's no voice for the players because they're not. They should be employees and they're not. They should be able to unionize and they can't. And that's, I think, where we're at the end of the day where we're headed. But they need to be more inclusive of players' voices, and the NCAA just hasn't done that. And it's almost like it's a cultural thing with them where they lord over these student athletes, and they say we're going to do what's best for you while doing things that aren't best for them. And I think the courts have grown tired of it. So yeah, it's a lot of it's a system, but the courts have been very aggressive with the NCAA to the point that they're going to set off a lot of chaos within what are essentially big businesses, athletic departments. So it could be a really messy last half of this month.
Fitz, it is all very difficult to keep up with. Just not even off the court stuff, but on the court stuff. You guys will have us covered at Go Power Cat. How are things coming together on this transfer portal and these off seasons now as they are moving forward feverishly?
Yeah, we're trying to stay on top of everything. There's just a lot of moving pieces. Actually, spring football has been kind of quiet. I mean, we get a lot of press conferences, but no earth-shattering news coming out of that, particularly on the injury front, which is good. So we just keep plugging away here. In fact, I'm putting up a VIP for our subscribers film study of Doug McDaniel right now, and that'll be available here later this morning for our subscribers at Go Power Cat.
Well, that's perfect. I joked earlier, like we all get excited about these transfers that we've never seen play for 1 second for the most part.
Yeah,
we know Zeke Mayo, right? But for the most part, even at a program like Michigan, the chances that you've seen any significant amount of Doug McDaniel are low. But we all look at we all look at box scores and all these other things. So I'm glad you guys have that for us. Fitz, enjoy it. I will imagine there will be more movement by the time we talk to you next week for this K-State basketball roster.
It'll get interesting. Thank you so much. There
goes Tim Fitzgerald. You can find the work at gopowercat.com. You can follow him on social media at Life of Fitz. Appreciate Fitz's time. We'll talk to him again next week. We'll come back on the way out here. Let's give away some HTO, Jad. We'll give away a little iced tea. More than 25 flavors to choose from, including the new limited time edition Strawberry Passion. It is back. It is wildly popular.
One of my favorites.
To drink it for a while. Yeah, Jad's asked me about it. There are a lot of people that asked me about it. It's the second time it's been there, but it is back. You can get it at either Wichita location, East and West Wichita, 13th and Tyler West, 21st to 127th East, or in Derby there on Rock Road. So get your chance for that and a little coffee featuring now Free Reign Coffee. Cole Hauser, his coffee company. He's famously of Yellowstone. That's Rip from Yellowstone. He's got a coffee company, and his coffee is now being sold at HTO. You can get that in East Wichita Derby. Good luck, everybody. You get one of each right now. First caller on the KFH hotline, 869-1240. Don't go away. All right, welcome back in, everybody. Glad to have you. Congratulations to our winners of our HDO prize, of our Wichita Wind Surge 4 voucher prize. Lots of fun stuff. We love giving stuff away. Thanks to Tim Fitzgerald for jumping in. GoPowerCat.com, our K-State Insider. If you missed any of that conversation, you can always go back and listen to it on the Odyssey app. Anthony Smith in for Tommy Castor today. First time on Sports Daily. Glad to have Anthony in here. Jad Chambers producing. Final four. Anthony, you know, I'm looking here. I know you've called in as a caller, but where are you at with this Final Four? Are you team UConn's going to be too much to handle? It is an interesting Final Four, certainly, because it does feel like UConn is this heavy favorite. You do have a nice Cinderella in there in NC State. Mm-hmm. You've got a team that's been near the top all year in Purdue, and Alabama's sort of this upstart who has a history of being great, who maybe flew a little under the radar this year. It's a good Final Four, but, you know, are you willing to give anybody a chance over UConn with as dominant as they've been in this tournament so far and back to last year's tournament?
Well, first of all, let me start with Alabama because last year Alabama was in the news for a lot of the wrong reasons.
Right.
So it's
Yep.
refreshing that now they're in the news for basketball reasons. So we got that out the way. UConn is UConn. And the general consensus is there's a lot of people that really don't want UConn to win for whatever reason. I think some people say their coach is arrogant. Well, if you stop and think about it, the only reason that we're talking about their coach is because we don't have Coach K to talk about. We don't have Roy Williams to talk about. We don't have Jay Wright to talk about. So we only got that one commodity as a known coach to talk about, and that's Hurley to talk about. You talk about Purdue. It starts with Zach Edey, the big man in the middle, traditional big man. I mean, when was the last time you could say we got a big man that actually plays with his back to the basket and plays like a 7-footer should play? And then there's the 1983. Oh, I'm sorry, the 2024 North Carolina State Wolfpack. Well, it feels like 1983 because just like in '83, they had to run their way through the ACC championship, and then, pardon the pun, they shocked the world and won the NCAA tournament. Could we see that again? So do I have a pick? Do I have a favorite? No, I don't. Even though UConn is the prohibitive favorite, this tournament, this Final Four is wide open. It's anybody's for the taking. But don't be surprised if the Wolfpack shock the nation.
It's interesting, too, that you bring up NC State as the team we've seen do this before. We've seen UConn do this before. UConn did this on that Kemba Walker team. They did the same sort of thing that NC State has done. I'm not going to write them off either. It's what always tricks me out in these tournaments is, can that momentum roll through an entire week off, right? Like we see Cinderellas make it through the first week, and then can that roll into the Sweet 16? Now it's, can that momentum roll into, the Final Four? I think where NC State as a Cinderella is different than George Mason as a Cinderella is NC State played, big time, high level, intense basketball in every game they basically played once the conference season started. So they'll be equipped for that part of it. It really does come down to, are they good enough, right? Are they good enough to get it done? And it will be very interesting in the game against Purdue. That line's bigger than I thought it would be at 8.5 right now on ESPN Bet, because Burns versus Edey is incredible, right? They're not the same player by any means, but they're both bigs. So they should, in theory, match up head to head. You've got the 2-time National Player of the Year against Burns, who has just exploded onto the scene. Burns, Edey, just at that matchup specifically. Anthony, who do you like in that matchup?
Oh, man, that is a very unfair question. I mean, I've seen Burns, I've seen Edey, and thus far, Edey has seemed very unstoppable. So it comes down to,
but in the tournament, so has Burns.
Right, and Burns too. So the question is, are the refs going to let them play?
Yeah, that's a good question. They have to. They have to swallow the whistle a little bit, don't they? Like, you can't, and I know a foul is a foul and all that stuff. You can't take that away. Like, you can't let those two just get into. Now, look, if it's egregious and they're fouling, they're fouling. That's a part of the matchup, too, that's interesting is, can either, when that matchup is going to be front and center and that intense, can either of these players avoid foul trouble? I think that's an intriguing part of the matchup.
Mm-hmm.
I think it will be harder for Burns to not foul Edey than vice versa, because Edey is just such a load. He's so big down there. It's hard to imagine stopping him without fouling him, isn't it? Like, how else do you stop a guy that's that big and strong?
Right. I'll tell you the one thing I don't want to see, though. I don't want to see a block shot, a clean block, and it's called a foul.
Right. Yeah.
And everybody
can't be wishy-washy there.
Right.
I agree.
And everybody and a newborn baby could see that the referee made a bad call. And you know what I'm alluding to.
It's bad calls are all over the place. But yeah, you just don't want that game with those two players getting into any sort of We don't want the officials to be on this, right? Like that's it's too. We don't get this sort of matchup very often in college basketball anymore, where it's two bigs like this battling, and it's going to be physical, right? It's going to be physical. Where's the over-under on that? 145. It's pretty interesting. We look at over and unders. I look at Bama and UConn at 160, which is, and in an 11-point game, that's about an implied score of 85 to, what would that be? 85 to 74-ish, 85 to 74, 86 to 74, which is where you're getting to that total. I think it's going to go higher than that. UConn can score. Alabama's got to score. If that game's going to be remotely close, Alabama's going to have to score a lot, or they may get beat and run out of the gym like everybody else. But they play such a style that, UConn could get to 90 in this game pretty easy, don't you think? Like 160 seems about right, but I think I'm leaning over on that. I think it's going to be a bit of a track meet.
This game does actually have the makings of a high scoring affair, but that also depends on if Grant Nelson gets untracked. Now,
right.
At 6'11", he has some amazing skills. I mean, he can handle the ball like a point guard. He can create his own shot, and he has such length. I mean, how do you stop him? Because he's another one, like you say, when you say up and coming, it's like he's come up out of nowhere. So, I mean, how do you stop him? And what Alabama is going to start with him, and he has the green light to pull the trigger, but he can also take you down low. So you have to prepare for him both ways. And how do you stop him?
Well, UConn's been able to stop everybody. They need him on track. They need to shoot well too. I mean, if Alabama doesn't shoot well, they're going to get smoked like everybody else gets smoked against UConn. I don't, and that's such a hard thing to guess for me, right? Like you can't take Alabama in the points, can you? If you think, I feel like if you're gonna, there's two. You either take UConn in the points and they cover all the time anyway, or you just take Alabama on the money line, don't you? Like at 5-1. I don't know that I'm playing that. It feels like there are always two outcomes in a UConn game. Either they just absolutely smash the competition, or they get beat.
Like they
so
did.
I think if you're going to take a swing at it, you take a swing at the money line, not the points. If UConn does what it wants to do, it'll probably do to Alabama what they do to everybody, which is beat them by a ton. I think that's the way. I like the over, and I look, I like the UConn cover as far as which way to bet it. But if you want to take a swing at Alabama, I feel like you just take a swing at the money line.
Yeah, I can see that. I might even try my hand at it, try to get my early retirement.
Well, right. I mean, it's a long shot, though. I mean, I get why it's 5-1. They're a big underdog here. They're a real big underdog, and I don't. Here's what it's so hard for me because I don't want UConn to keep doing. I don't like that they're beating everybody this badly in the tournament. I don't like that they're not giving us entertaining games, but at the same time, it does build some hype into seeing them fall, right? Like we all want to see the big bad, wolf get beat every once in a while. So it does add to the intrigue. Like let's say it ended up NC State and UConn. If NC State was able to pull that off, it'd be an all-timer. We'd remember that forever. Whereas if UConn was just sort of making their way through, and teams normally do, wouldn't be nearly as memorable. UConn losing at this point, I think, has reached that point, Anthony, where it will remember it, for a long time because they've just been that dominant. So it's sort of this double-edged sword. I hate that they're that dominant because I want more entertaining games. However, it does intensify anybody that beats them now. Even Purdue would feel like a pretty big upset if they were able to beat UConn. And that does add to it, I suppose, a little bit with what UConn's doing. But for the most part, I don't like it. I'd rather see a little more entertaining. They haven't given us an entertaining game now, Anthony, in 2 years.
Right.
UConn.
Right.
They're just killing everybody.
Now, Here's a very interesting scenario since we're talking Final Four. Can you imagine this right here? UConn versus North Carolina State and UConn versus North Carolina State, a first, men and women's side. Can you imagine that?
I can. I just think the chances of NC State beating South Carolina are even less than anybody beating UConn on the men's side. South Carolina, it's so funny on the women's side. Like we're enamored with the star power of Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and Paige Beckers. Like they're three mega stars. Man, South Carolina is good, and I wouldn't take anybody over South Carolina. So it's you have this really interesting scenario where you've had, all the attention and star power on not the best team. South Carolina is the best team. Don't you think? Like South Carolina's been the best team all year long. They're fantastic. So I mean, it'd be cool to see it, but there's of the 8 teams and the 4 games remaining across the men's and women's Final Four, nothing would surprise me more than North Carolina State beating South Carolina on the women's side. That of all of it, that would be to me the most surprising outcome by a pretty wide margin.
Right. So yeah, I'm kind of excited for this Final Four, and especially since I brought the women up, because if you stop and think about it, just the other day, a 12.3 million viewership for
It's wild.
Part 2 of Iowa versus LSU. How the women's game has transcended, because
that's storybook. That is storybook stuff. Let me ask you this, Anthony. I've had this discussion with a lot of people because I am ready for the women's game. Like I don't think we need to compare them as much as just appreciate both of them, because I think they both offer so much to us. Are you historically a women's basketball fan, Anthony, or are you new to it like a lot of people are?
I can answer that just like this. You remember Southwest Missouri State when they came to town, and a little old girl from Claflin, Kansas, packed out Henry Levitt Arena at the time it was known. Of course, she walked away without a win in that arena, but every time she came here, it was a packed house. That's how long I've been following it. And I always frown down on people who talk about women sports on sports talk radio, because look where it's come 20-something years later now.
I also have grown up a women's basketball fan. So, and I think it kind of has to do with where you're from. If, in the state of Kansas, not just Jackie Stiles, but Lynette Woodard, there is so much history in women's basketball here that I think most people follow it. And where I'm from in the Texas Panhandle, there are some traditional powers, but where I went to school, the women's program outdrew the men. That was, how long have I been out of college? Well, a long time. So I've always monitored it. I don't think I've watched it on television, though, traditionally the way I have this year. That's been the big difference for me. I've always been a consumer of it in person, and like the teams that are around me, maybe not as much as TV. And that's what NIL is doing. And it's a part of it. And Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark deserve so much credit for building up the hype to make this now this television product that we've all fallen in love with. But here's what I would contend, Anthony. I think that what's happening right now, it's not so much that and I wish that people would stop doing this, stop trying to guilt trip people. Like, if you want to watch women's basketball, watch women's basketball. I don't care what you watch. You don't have to watch anything. You can watch whatever you want. What I think is happening, though, is we're seeing the growth of just women being a fan of sports on TV, right? Like, look at the crowds. Look at who's talking about it. I think where we're seeing this tremendous growth, and I think this is so cool, is we're just seeing more women interested because of this in watching and consuming sports the way that men have forever. And so that's where, that's untapped. You don't have to switch. You don't have to add to what you're doing. We're seeing this organic growth because we're seeing more women drawn to it. And that's what I think is so cool, and why I think that women's basketball specifically has so much earning and growth potential when we think about conference realignments and all these television deals, is because advertisers want women. That's primarily in most things, that's the target of advertisers. So if you've got this thing now drawing more women to it, like it's going to create endless opportunities, not just for the athletes, but for the schools, the conferences, and everybody else, because I think you're bringing, just in general, young, old, whatever, more women into just wanting to watch a game on TV. Like for a lot of time, and it's a stereotype, but we can look into that stuff. Like that's sort of what guys do, right? We waste our time watching sports on TV, listening to sports on the radio. That's one of our escapes. I think we're seeing now more women involved in that. And I personally, I love that. I think it's so cool because it just expands it. It expands what we all love so much. And these two young women deserve so much credit for creating this. Could you imagine right now the pressure and the burden and just imagine being Caitlin Clark or Angel Reese and how much attention has flooded in suddenly. I mean, it is wild to think about this explosion under these two. Man, it's awesome. All right, we'll come back here on Sports Daily. We have more to get to on the program today. We'll take you around a little bit of an update in the Rashee Rice situation that we need to talk about briefly. We can get into some of the other headlines around the Nationals. Some interesting news on the Oakland A's I want to tell you about. The Cowboys and the Chiefs in Dallas. The Dallas mayor shooting for that. There's a lot of little news and notes we'll get to in our final full segment when we return on Sports Daily. It's Jacob Albracht, Anthony Smith with you on a Thursday. All right, welcome back in, everybody, on Sports Daily here. Jake Albracht, Anthony Smith in for Tommy Castor. A lot of little news and notes here, Anthony, that we can rip through. The A's apparently are going to spend the years of 2025 through 2027 in Sacramento at a stadium that holds currently 10,000 people, and they're going to try and modify to hold up to 14,000 people. This has just been such a mess with the A's. Now they move to a park for 3 years. 3 years. They're going to play in a 10,000. Now, I guess it wouldn't matter right now because they're not drawing that many people to Oakland anyway. But come on now. Like, what are we doing here?
I mean, that suits them just well. I mean,
could you imagine being a big leaguer? Like, they're never going to get a free agent again. Hey guys, we're going to come play it, in this, is it a minor league park? Like, I don't even know. I mean, I guess if the facilities are nice, it would be equivalent to having the Royals move into, Riverfront Stadium for a few years. Big leaguers would probably be all right with that because the facilities are very nice. Right. But what are we doing here? How does this been so bungled like this? How does Major League Baseball even let this happen? It's like you've got a minor league team out there playing, both on the field too, because the roster's not ever going to be any good. It's just wild.
Well, if memory serves me correct, I go back to last year now. I believe the Miami Marlins had a good baseball team, and it was only drawing like 7,000 people to a game.
Yeah.
I mean, if they need to reach out and say, hey, Oakland, if y'all need a place to play, we only draw 7,000. That's only about what y'all are going to get. So feel free to come play at our park as well, too. You'll feel right at home.
Yeah. I mean, does Vegas not have a better place to put them for a year? It's wild to me. But that's whatever. That's what is going to happen with the A's. And I think the troubling part is probably nobody really cares that's going to happen. Did you see this? So, the vote goes to no.
Right.
In Jackson County there. Yesterday, the Dallas mayor is like, hey, welcome home, Dallas Texans. He's pitching to have two teams there in the Dallas area. And I'm like, come on now. It is interesting, though, to think about, like, what is the I yesterday, a lot of people just kind of water coolering this. Like, I think most likely you'll see the division here of the Chiefs and the Royals. I don't think they can go to the same ballot anymore. The Royals are kind of downtown or bust for Kansas City and its future, one way or the other. And if they don't get downtown, I really would fear them leaving. The Chiefs aren't that way, though. The Chiefs can go wherever they want. There's a bunch of places the Chiefs could go within the region. So nice try, Dallas mayor. I don't think they're leaving the Kansas City area because they'll have plenty of suitors in the Kansas City area, whether it's on the Kansas side, the Missouri side, whatever county it is. Like, nobody's going to let the Chiefs leave, but the Royals will be interesting.
Can you imagine, though, the Chiefs in a move to the Dallas area? They would then, for real, become the most hated team in the NFL outside of the Dallas Cowboys and the Las Vegas Raiders.
No. We don't need to imagine it because it would never happen. It never happened. The Chiefs, I think there's going to be real, and there were, we didn't get into this today. There are real conversations happening to try to get the Chiefs over to Kansas. And, if you go way back on the sports betting thing, as soon as the Chiefs toyed that out there, man, people got it into high gear. They got sports wagering. They set aside a portion of the sports wagering funds to specifically go to luring pro sports teams in here. Like, the money is already, I don't know how complicated it is. Now, it's not a ton of money. It wouldn't be enough money, but it is the beginning of it. And as this goes on and it becomes very clear, there's no way to me that Jackson County voters, that many of them, if they lost by 17%, I don't think they can make that up. And they're sort of running out of time. People are saying, oh, they still have 6 years. They got to build potentially 2 stadiums here between the Royals and the Chiefs now. If it's not going to that Jackson County scenario, 6 years isn't a lot of time. Mm-mm. Ask the Oakland A's, who now have to go play in Sacramento for a minute while they finish building their stadium in Vegas. Like the movement on this is probably faster than people realize, I would guess.
Right. So it's back to Oakland then. Where would that stadium be built at? I mean, when they moved to Vegas.
In
where would
Vegas,
that,
the new one, it's you know where the Tropicana is? They're just about to tear down the Tropicana. It'll be right there. I think that's the south end of the strip, right where the Tropicana is in that general area. It's going to be right there on the strip. It'll be right there. Kind of, they're kind of putting everything down. Vegas is exploding, man. If you haven't been down there lately, it's wild. All right, let's take our final break. We'll come back. We'll put a bow on it. Tell you what's on the network tonight. It's Sports Daily on a Thursday. All right, that'll do it for Thursday. Anthony, we appreciate you being in today, man. Good job.
Man, happy to be here. Thanks for having me. We have to do this again.
Yeah, a lot of fun here today. Jed Chambers producing. Coming up on the network today, you've got regular programming, including Bob and Jeff from 2 to 4. Jim Rome follows us immediately. Then you've got Wichita State baseball getting that win yesterday. You'll have the Royals to look forward to. Royals baseball right here on KFH and available for free on the Odyssey app. So you can tune in and find that. Jacob Albracht here saying goodbye. We'll see you tomorrow.